Okay, today what I'm going to show you, for some of you who are still trying to figure out why you keep having problems with burning of the milk, getting that yellowing or browning color that you tend to have when you're adding the lye, or lumps or whatever. Now there are several ways that you can add your lye to your milk by setting your milk down in ice water. Excuse me. But more times than not, I find that when I freeze the milk in a big lump like this, or when it's still really frozen, you don't need to set it in ice at the very beginning. You can do that later on. So, also, I wanted to show you the higher the fat content in your milk, the more it tends to burn. So if you think, like if you have Nigerian dwarfs, or if you have you've saved the milk from an early lactation on a doe, let's say it was in the first month of her lactation, and you froze the milk, well, the butterfat's going to be much higher in that during that time versus if you had pulled the milk, say, 6 to 7 months after she had started lactating, towards the end of her lactation even, if you're going to dry them up. So the water content is higher later in lactation, whereas the butterfat is real high in early lactation. So to prevent this, because I know this milk was froze probably, I believe it was within the first 4 weeks of lactation, so the butterfat's going to be rather high. Right now it has a little bit of melting going on. So what you can do, the recipe calls for 10 to, I believe it's 13 ounces of milk. This is 10 ounces of milk. Now, recipes for soap making, a lot of people concern themselves over having to have the milk exact amount, and you do not need to do that. You don't even have to weigh the milk, or if you're using some kind of liquid, you can simply measure it in a cup, because the amount of liquid can vary. It really can, up to even 4, and some people even do a difference of 6 ounces. I usually do upwards of max of 4 over. So in this case, it's 10 ounces of milk with higher butterfat. So I'm going to add what looks to be about, 2 ounces, maybe 1.5 ounces. So that generally is about anywhere from 1/8 of a cup, right there. And so what I'm doing is I'm watering it down so the fat isn't as high, and I have more liquid or water and less burning. So once I've kind of mixed it and moved it around, now I can add a little bit of lye. Now I don't need my gloves at this point because, well, first of all, I'm careful when I add the lye. I'm not splattering it everywhere. So I'm just going to add, you're only going to add maybe 1.5 tablespoons each time. I know it doesn't seem like very much, but it sure is helpful to keep it from burning your milk. And yeah, I just poured it right on top of the milk, but I'm going to squish it around. And I just stir it. And I make sure that I try to splatter it up on, or not splatter, but kind of spoon it over the top. And then I just stir it around. You have to move it. And usually you can feel and hear the lye in the bottom of your cup or whatever, your bowl you're mixing it in. You can hear kind of a graininess. And then as it dissolves, you won't hear it. And of course you have to pay attention to the ice sound versus the little bit of grainy going down. So I just stir it a little while. Nothing fast. You don't have to hurry, because that's when you wind up burning yourself. So, and then you'll let it sit for a little while. This is the one part of soap making that takes some time. If you feel like it's getting too warm, as the milk melts, you can add either an ice pack underneath of it, or pack it around ice, put it in a container with ice and water, and that way it keeps it cool. So now if I was to take the temperature of it, I need to get the temperature of the milk. It says 24, 24, 25. So see, I'm not gonna bother putting it on ice yet because I've still got it quite cold. But if you notice, no color change. And that's what's nice about it, is it didn't start turning yellow, simply because I'm not hurrying the lye. Now at this point, I could actually add a little bit more lye. And I'll just pour it right there on the side. What looks to be about another tablespoon or so. And just stir it in. And then what I do is I usually leave it set for about 10 minutes or so in between adding the lye, and I get other things done. So, you know, normally I will melt the oils at the same time that I'm doing this, so, you know, in between. It doesn't take very long to melt the oils. Some people use a microwave. I use a stove and put the heat on very low. Or you can melt your oils the day before, which in this case I did. I melted the oils yesterday, so they're getting, as you see, kind of setting up again. And in some cases they'll get way cloudy and almost act like they're going to set up all the way, which is what I was actually hoping, but it didn't do that this time. So what I want to show you next is molds. Okay, in this case I have a long mold that my husband made, and then since I'm going to be doing a soap with scraps and pieces in it, I'm only using a 2-pound soap recipe, and I'm going to be adding all these scraps and pieces, different sizes, colors, whatever. I'm going to be adding that into the mold, into this one, and then some into this one. So, if you think that you only want to do part of a long mold and you're doing a small batch and you're, how do I take up the space? I don't have any other molds. In this case, I put a half brick in the mold. I seriously did, and it was a broken one. So I just lined it up, and here's a little gap, but that's okay. With the paper over it, we're not gonna see any difference, and I just packed the paper down in there. Some people cut off the edges and tape it. Personally, I don't bother with that because it doesn't change anything. So, but that's kind of giving you an idea whether you can use a brick inside your mold or a big chunk of wood, you know, to set in there. This one is a little too small and moves around, so I couldn't get everything in there. So, but I am going to be doing the the soap recipe, that is the 2x2, but I am altering it because I've noticed several of you keep having problems with the amounts that's in there, and they keep saying that it's breaking when you cut it. So I've altered it to do a little bit more of the olive oil. It was 16 on both of them, so I'm going to do 20 on the olive oil and only 12 on the coconut oil. And then we'll see how that turns out. I have a feeling that will be a much better way of doing that. So, but that's kind of a good start for you. I will try to attempt to video record the rest of it and see how that turns out.